Welcome back to What You Missed, a video game news show where I discuss articles that occurred within days to a week ago that you may have missed that are important to the video game industry and possibly to you.
So there's an article on IGN, 4 things we want in a Pokemon Nintendo Switch game. And these 4 things are kind of crazy to me. I mean, most of them are something that I personally wouldn't want. And I think how I feel is kind of what lines up with a lot of Pokemon fans. At least some of the more hardcore gamers out there. I can understand if you'd like some of these things, but let's talk about these things. Let's detail it. First things first, I wanted to talk about Pokemon Coliseum and Gale XD. And Stadium, of course, and other games that did appear. Basically, the Coliseum and Gale XD, Gale Darkness, those games were a little bit different, a little bit off-putting because they felt super edgy. You know, the protagonist was an edgelord, shall we put it. And that's not a bad thing, but they definitely reflect the times when they were released. You wanted a cool, edgy protagonist who's an anti-hero, and it's like, while that's cool and great and everything, it kind of doesn't age that well. You know, this isn't the Punisher of Pokemon here. This is just some edgelord kid who stole something and is deciding to do something good with it instead of being a bad guy, I guess. Those games had their limitations because there were no places where you could go in grass, capture a Pokemon, you know, stuff like that. You had to use a strange mechanic, and there was a big setup for this mechanic, and it interfered with battles a lot of the time. And while it was unique, shall we put it, it was not the experience that a lot of people wanted, just due to the simple fact that a lot of people wanted the 8 gym, catch random Pokemon, have a rival, and defeat a team experience, but on a home console. Now, a lot of people like those games, and I'm not going to say that they're necessarily bad, but they are definitely not comparable to the leading selling games on the portable consoles, like the Game Boys and 3DSs, like the Pokemon Suns, like the Pokemon Reds, Golds, things like that. So there you go. That's the problem I have with those consoles and those games for those consoles. So if the Nintendo Switch is going to have a Pokemon game, which it probably will because Pokemon's on mobile consoles and the Nintendo Switch is technically a mobile hybrid console, let's look at this specific list of things that IGN apparently wants. Pokemon in the overworld. This is something that I just outlined. Yes, players want to go into the grass, catch a random Pokemon, train it up, and see that their training and their efforts put into raising this Pokemon will pay off with them defeating specific gym leaders. But again, if you don't have those comparable trainers that are difficult to overcome, that you don't have those comparable gym leaders, you don't have the Elite Fours, you don't have the opposing teams to defeat, you don't feel like you're actually doing anything with the Pokemon that you're raising up, you're not going to get that reward. You're not going to get the feeling that you're raising something and you're doing something in that world. You're not going to get the RPG feeling of having troubles in the beginning with facing a certain opponent and then returning later on once you become stronger and overcoming it easily. So that's a big thing, and I agree with that. You definitely do want Pokemon in the overworld. Unfortunately, the second thing is other players in real time. Now, other players in real time. Really, this is what you want. They said likable, lively NPCs are becoming more common in Pokemon games, but they want fellow human players. If you want a Pokemon MMORPG, that's one thing completely separate from a game that you can play offline on the go without having to connect to a network. How would the Switch even handle that when you're on the road or something? You just wouldn't be able to interact with the humans, huh? Right? So obviously they would make it in a way that, you know, humans could come into your game here and there. And while that's great and good and everything, there has to be some type of restrictions. There have to be systems in place to prevent people from griefing you and things like that. And it's exactly what I just said. It's a whole lot of grief. It's troublesome to try and implement the system in. I don't mind the system that we have. You should be able to go into a room, say, hey, I want to battle this person with these specific conditions, put a post up, and then if someone sees it, they can say, hey, yeah, I want to battle you too, or I can trade. And the systems that we have for trading and battling are pretty decent right now. They could, of course, be better, but I don't think real-world humans walking up to you while you're catching Pokemon in the grass with a weakened party and just challenging you out of nowhere, or blocking your pathways into a place, even if you could walk through them, there would still be people that would be able to just really bother you, right? Just go into locations, troll people, things like that. And I think they kind of need to realize this before they ask for this. That's all I'm saying. It's pretty crappy to get trolled real hard on a video game when all you want to do is just play the game, despite how funny it might be. Multiplayer minigames is the next thing, and I cannot disagree more. Look, Pokemon Stadium had some real cool minigames, but I'm not entirely sure a lot of people rented Pokemon Stadium to play the minigames. Hence, it shouldn't really be a big part of the game. So multiplayer minigames are kind of cool at the same time, and I'm not against being able to play them, but I am against the idea of spending an excessive amount of time developing these minigames that are ultimately going to be thrown away in favor of making them just as a side venture, instead of putting the core focus on new features, new designs, and better balance and more comparable modes like a harder difficulty in the base game itself. When I play through a Pokemon game, I want to be challenged to a point where I think I'm going to consistently fail. I don't want to know that I'm going to succeed at every single battle and find a way to just completely outdo the game. Just have one Pokemon out in front and steamroll every trainer. That's not what I want in the game. And multiplayer minigames are cool, but ultimately they become throwaway minigames because in every single Pokemon franchise that we've seen, these minigames are not a mainstay. They're usually thrown in, and they usually have very little to do with the core gameplay of the game itself. It's not like winning these minigames usually give you anything, unless you're referring to the slot machines in Gen 1, in which case that's a pretty cool game. But at the end of the day, there was very little that you would get from it, and once you got everything you wanted from it, it was no longer something you needed to play to get anything out of. And thus, many people didn't play it for hours on end. Hence, minigames are very much throwaway things. The final thing is Pokemon Snap. I think everyone wants Pokemon Snap. I'm not going to deny that, but I think releasing it as a standalone application or game at a $5 to $10 to $20 rate for a more updated, remastered, or even a Pokemon Snap 2 would be really awesome. I do not want Pokemon Snap in my games. I don't like taking pictures in Pokemon games. It's not my thing. When I'm playing Pokemon, I don't whip my camera out and say, cheese, smile for the camera. I'm there to combat the opponents, overcome challenges, and try to finish the game. It's not about taking pictures for me. And I don't know if that's just because I'm that type of person and other people feel completely different, but that's just personally how I feel. There's nothing wrong with Pokemon Snap at all. I agree wholeheartedly that there should be another Pokemon Snap game. Lots of people love the games. I couldn't agree more. But I would way rather it have a separate entry into the series instead of trying to pack all of these new features into one game under the sun, where most of these new features aren't ever going to be utilized by me. If Pokemon Snap became a afterthought, like you beat the entire game, Professor Oak comes out of nowhere, gives you a camera and says, hey, I need you to take a picture of every Pokemon there is, and then I had to go around and take a picture of every Pokemon, fine. That's an end game element. Sweet, cool. It's an added little adventure. But the way Pokemon Snap is set up, it's like an entire game on its own. And I'd hate to see them try to split up the game that's going to be released on the Switch into different sections, cutting out chunks of time from the core game itself just to incorporate something ridiculous like Pokemon Snap when you could easily release it as a standalone app or game and do just fine. I don't know if I'm alone in that statement or alone in that feeling, but you can leave your comments and thoughts in the section below. As far as all of these requests, I don't think they're insane. I don't think it's ridiculous to ask for this stuff, but I do think it would dumb down the game. I think it would water it down. I think the number one thing that everyone wants from these Pokemon games that are going to be coming up and releasing in the future is one massive Pokemon world that combines all of the generations together and allows you to play through all of them. Maybe in a way where you could restart each journey, maybe in a way where it progressively got harder, maybe in a way where it figured out your Pokemon's levels and where you were in the game and tailored the trainers' Pokemon's levels to that as well. I think that would be really cool. I think it would be pretty ridiculous to see the glitches that you could pull off with that, but at the same time, that's part of the fun and that's what makes it great. I think everyone loved Generation 2 for the simple fact that you could go back and you could see what happened 2 years later after after what you did in the original game. It's like a callback. It's a nod to what you did. And wouldn't it be awesome to go back to Hone and say, just set it 2 to 3 to 4 years later and see, hey, this is what happened after the protagonist saved the world. And same with Platinum, same with Black and White, same with the other games. I think it would be absolutely sweet and cool. And for me personally, I would love to see a Pokemon walking behind you. Every Pokemon walking behind you, just like in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Pokemon Crystal. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Leave me your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I've been your host, Protomario. I'm signing out. Please make sure to like and share this with others. And as always, thanks for watching. Good gaming, God bless, and I'll see you next time.